Hi friends, very good morning to all of you and welcome to detailed editorial discussion. Right friends, uh, the article, the editorial now we are going to see is it is written by the Secretary General of United Nations. He is Antonio Guterres. Right friends, this article appeared in the Indian Express a couple of days ago, and he calls for climate action. Right, friends? Global community, especially developed countries, must commit to climate action. Right, friends? We will go and see the article in detail. Right, friends? He says that now is the time for bold climate action. Right, friends? To do this, we must get to net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by mid-century. So he calls that we have to get to net zero emissions by 2050, and countries making up about two-thirds of global economy have committed to do so. So friends, the countries who are making two-thirds of the world GDP now are committed to the goal he is calling for. Friends, as you all know, many European countries and even countries like New Zealand and Australia, they have declared that by 2050 they are going to achieve net zero emissions. So he says that the countries, comparatively richer countries, have made some declarations about net zero emissions. Okay, friends, he says this is encouraging, but we urgently need every country, city, business, and financial institution to join this coalition and adopt concrete plans for transitioning to net zero. So, friends, he says this is not enough. Only richer countries declaring net zero emissions. This is not enough. Not enough. He says every country, every city, and every institution all should declare and commit to net zero emissions. Right, friends. Now he discusses about funding for fighting the climate change. Even more urgent is for governments to match this long-term ambition with concrete actions now, as trillions of dollars are mobilized to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. Friends, as we all know, countries or the world has successful in mobilizing funds towards fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. So similarly, if we treat climate change as serious as COVID-19 pandemic, really it is the dangers of climate change are, if not more, as dangerous as COVID-19 pandemic. So as we are successful in raising funds for fighting COVID-19, we can also raise funds for fighting the climate change. Right, friends? Revitalizing economies is our chance to re-engineer our future. So, revitalizing economies from COVID-19 pandemic is giving a chance to re-engineering our future. Right, friends? The world has a strong framework action. He says the framework is Paris Climate Agreement. Right, friends? The Paris Agreement, in which all countries committed to set their own national climate action plans and strengthen them every 5 years. So those plans are, friends, INDs, is intended nationally determined contributions, and over 5 years later, and with the damning proof that if we don't act, we will destroy our planet. So after 5 years of climate change, I mean it's almost 6 years now. So there is a concrete proof that if we don't act on the intended nationally determined contributions, we are going to destroy our planet and as well as our future. So friends, he calls for it is time for decisive and effective action as the United Nations convenes all countries in Glasgow in November for COP26. So the COP26 is going to be held in Glasgow. So the Secretary General says there is a need to take decisive actions to fight climate change. Right, friends? And he presents some plans The new national plans must cut global greenhouse gas pollution by at least 45% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. So he asked that by 2030 nations must reduce cut their greenhouse gas emission by 45% compared to 2010 levels. Right, friends, many have been presented already and set out clear policies to adapt to the impacts of climate change and boost access to renewable energy. So some countries have walked the talk and they have taken measures to fight the climate change and as well as to adapt to climate change. Friends, India is the best example. We are investing heavily in renewable energy, and is also we are trying to control the greenhouse gas emissions. Excuse me, like methane and other gases. So like that, many countries have taken steps to fight climate change, friends. But he says, but so far those plans achieve less than 1% cut in emissions. So he says those plans declared by the countries, they failed to cut at least 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Friends, this is a true red alert for the planet. Right, friends. Now he talks about the leader summit that is held by the US President Joe Biden. Friends, in the months ahead, beginning with the upcoming leader summit hosted by the United States, governments must dramatically set up their ambitions, particularly the biggest emitting countries. So the biggest emitting countries must set up their ambitious plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Friends, the Secretary General asks, phasing out coal from the electricity sector is the single most important step to get in line with the 1.5 degree goal. So as you all know, under the Paris Climate Agreement, there is a target that we should confine the global temperature rise to less than 1.5%. So we can achieve one important thing we have to do is phase out the coal from the electricity sector. Right, friends? Further he says immediate action to remove the dirtiest, most polluting fossil fuel from power sectors offers our world a fighting chance. So he calls for phasing out coal from the electricity generation. Friends, but think about countries like India and other developing countries. Are we in a position to eliminate entirely the coal from electricity generation? So a couple of days back we have seen the discussion about development versus environment. So what is the priority for developing countries like India now? Whether they should focus on the development or they should focus on the environment. So friends, the suggestion given by the Secretary General may not be practical for countries like India, for developing countries like India, because the poverty levels are still high in countries like ours. So if we eliminate the fuels like coal, we may not achieve the targets of poverty alleviation and empowering the citizens. So try to balance the arguments. Try and see merit in each point, and you take that point accordingly. Right, friends? The Secretary General now calls for phasing out the coal, and he gives some plans to do that. Right, friends? The global coal use in electricity generation must fall by 80% below 2010 levels by 2030. So he suggests that coal use must be fall by 80% by 2030. This means that developed economies must commit to phasing out coal by 2030. Other countries must do this by 2040. So developed countries must eliminate coal by 2030, and other countries, rest of the countries, by 2040. Right friends, there is simply no reason for any new coal plants to be built anywhere. He said there is no need to build a new coal power plant in the future, upcoming future. Right friends, further he says 1/3 of the global coal fleet is already more costly to operate than building new renewables and storage. So he says friends, 1/3 of coal power plants, so I mean operating them is costlier now than establishing a renewable energy plant like solar energy plant or wind energy power plant. So because of that, he says that there is no need for, I mean there should not be any establishment of new coal power plant. Right friends, COP26 must signal an end to coal. So he wants that the November summit that is going to be held in November, COP26, it should give a signal that future for coal has been ended. Friends, now he talks about just transition. It is also essential that we ensure a just transition. Workers in impacted industries and the informal sector must be supported as they move jobs or reskill. So some industries are going to be affected because they have to be shut down, like coal power plants, and we should ensure that the workers in those sectors and as well as in informal sector, their transition is smooth by imparting them required technical skills to find out jobs in other sectors like renewable energy. Right friends, we must also unleash the vast power of women and girls to drive transformation. So we should utilize the vast power of women and girls to drive the transformation. That is what the Secretary General says. Right friends, now he talks about the climate justice. The countries that contributed least to climate change are suffering many of the worst impacts. So this is really true in island countries. So they have contributed very little in terms of greenhouse gases, but the effects, impact faced by the climate change is most severe on them. Like they are facing the problem of rising ocean levels, and their islands are the islands are going to submerge, and they are increasingly facing the cyclones and typhoons, so they are bearing the brunt more. Right friends, many small island nations will simply cease to exist if we don't step up the response. Right friends, you must have heard about the island nation Tuvalu. It is almost on the brink of submergence, and we already have seen the first impact of climate change on countries like Maldives. So if we don't act, the countries simply cease to exist. They might disappear in the rising ocean waters. Right friends, the developed countries must deliver on their commitments to provide and mobilize 100 billion annually. So this commitment has been made at the Paris Climate Summit. So to create a green climate fund, and countries will contributed 100 billion say dollar, $100 billion per year to fight the climate change. So this commitment needs to be fulfilled, and the Secretary General gives some measures how we can fulfill this commitment. Doubling current levels of climate finance. So we have to double the commitments, current levels of climate finance, and devoting half of all climate finance to adaptation. Friends, you might be aware of what is adaptation and what is mitigation. Mitigation is reducing the climate changes themselves, and adaptation is we become habitual or becoming comfortable to the changes that are going to occur due to climate change. So the Secretary General asks for allocating half of the climate funds, climate finance towards adaptation. Because friends, adaptation is very big, important, because smaller and poorer countries may not be in a position to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So the best way forward for them is to adapt to the changes of climate change. Right friends, stopping the international funding of coal. So we can do it. We can stop the international funding of coal. Right friends, shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So we can also do this. We can shift the subsidies for dirty fuels, fossil fuels, and we can fund the renewable energy sector. Right friends, he has some hopes for future, like G7 summit. It is going to be held in June. This offers the opportunity for the world's wealthiest countries to step up and provide the necessary financial commitments that will ensure the success of COP26. So G7 countries, they are the richest countries in the world. So they can give commitments to fund the required finances towards fighting the climate change. While governments must lead, decision makers everywhere have a vital role to play. So governments are going to lead this fight, but decision makers everywhere, they also have a lot to contribute towards fighting the climate change. Right friends, now the Secretary General calls the entire world and each and every individual to, I ask all multilateral and national developments banks by COP26. So he is asking all international banks to have clear policies in place to fund the COVID-19 recovery and the transition to resilient economies in developing countries. So he asked all international development banks to help the countries to fight the COVID-19 pandemic and make the economies resilient, so that they can focus on the fight against the climate change. And for individuals, he gives a message: I encourage young people everywhere to continue to raise their voices for action to address climate change, protect biodiversity, and stop humanity's war on nature, and accelerate efforts to achieve sustainable development goals. So friends, for you, this is his message. And for international development banks, national and international development banks, this is his message. Right friends, this is an important article. You might get a question in the mains examination, and the information we have learned till now, it can be used in answering the prelims questions also. Friends, this is all from this session. Thank you for joining me. See you next time. Have a good day.